Well guys, I have a confession to make. When I installed this new Vista Pro radiator in the F-250, I inadvertently ordered the wrong fan belt and had to go in with the old fan belt again, which is very cracked and starting to get frayed on the edges. And you can see more of the cracking around the water pump pulley. That's probably the original belt on the truck. Definitely has to be replaced. And reason I got confused is that there are two different belts for the F-250, and it depends on the gross vehicle weight of the truck. And if I look on the label, it clearly says gross vehicle weight rating is 8,800 pounds. But on the parts catalog, it was going by GVW less than 8,500 pounds. And the mistake I made was I was confusing GVWR with GVW. The truck definitely weighs less than 8,500 pounds. So I inadvertently ordered the wrong belt. I ordered the belt for the truck that was greater than 8,500 pounds instead of less than 8,500 pounds. But to make lemons out of lemonade, that actually gave me a much better opportunity to order a new belt. That mistake forced me to do a little bit more research in getting the right belt, and what I ended up choosing is the Gates belt, which is the same as I had before, but the Fleetrunner series, which is a much more heavy-duty belt. There's the part number for it. These are the belts that are usually found on the heavy-duty diesels, and they don't make these belts for all the trucks, just mainly heavy-duty vehicles and trucks. You're not going to be able to find one for a Honda Civic, for example, but hopefully if you guys have a Chevy truck or a Ford truck or Dodge truck, you can find a belt like this. Supposedly these belts are supposed to last, 100,000 miles at least. So I'll go ahead and put that in. And before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and replace the transmission cooler hose, also with a Gates hose. I got the right size this time, 5/16. I meant to replace that hose when I did the radiator, but I had a 3/8 hose instead. And a YouTube user wanted to know the routing of the transmission cooling on the F-250s. He actually has a Bronco. And because this F-250 has the heavy-duty cooling package, it has an auxiliary transmission cooler right in there. That little radiator there, which is actually very generously sized. So to start out with, as far as the routing question goes, hot transmission fluid comes into this line here, into the intake cooler first in the radiator, and exits out of that bottom fitting right there at the bottom of the radiator, and then it goes on and comes into this side of the oil to air heat exchanger and comes out on the passenger side. There are the two fittings on the bottom, and it finally goes on into down into the transmission. And I've already pre-cut this hose to the right length, and what I'll be doing basically is just replacing that hose right there. It's kind of hard and cracked, not leaking or anything, but it is 18 years old, and this will be a pretty easy job. I've already got a drain bucket there to catch any extra fluid. Just take off the screw clamp, one here and one toward the front, and take off the hose and then put the new one on. So let me get that done first, and then I'll get back to the Serpentine belt. Okay, now I've got the new flexible transmission cooler hose installed, and that's much more flexible than the old hose. Got the clamps nice and tight. And this gives you kind of a bottom view of the transmission cooler routing. This line here is coming from the transmission, goes over, makes a 90, and comes up and goes to the top of the radiator, or the intake transmission cooler. Then you have a second line coming from the bottom, output of the transmission radiator cooler. It goes all the way across like this, and then turns in, and you can't see, but it goes to the input of the air to oil, or oil to air heat exchanger, and then the output of that cooler goes through this hose and this return line back into the transmission. And I think the reason this hose lasted as long as it did is because it's handling the cooler side of the transmission fluid versus the hot side over here. And it's just nice to have that replaced, because that's one of those little things that a lot of people don't really think about that could really leave you on the side of the road and also damage your transmission by dumping all the fluid everywhere. And a lot of people don't think about that, and rightfully so, because most trucks or cars don't have the auxiliary transmission coolers installed. They just have the intake cooler in the radiator for transmission. And when that's the case, these lines are basically all the hard lines, not the soft flexible lines. So that's definitely something to watch out for if your truck has the heavy duty cooling package or towing package, where it has the oil to air heat exchanger in the radiator. So that gives me some peace of mind. And now it's going to be on to the serpentine belt finally. And anytime I do any kind of repairs on the truck or maintenance, I always try to actually make improvements by using as high quality parts as I can, like Visteon radiators and the Intersys battery, the Odyssey trade name for it. And serpentine belt is basically no exception, because here again, this is one of those items that a lot of people don't think about, and it's fairly easy to replace, and it's pretty much a single point of failure. If you lose this belt, you can go for a while without the alternator, particularly with a high quality, high capacity battery. You can go without the air conditioning compressor. You could drive without power steering for a while. It's kind of hard to do, but it's possible. And of course, down there, the air pump, nobody cares about the air pump, so that's nothing to worry about. You can drive without that. But one thing you can't drive without is the water pump. If that belt breaks and you lose the water pump, you'll very quickly overheat the engine and possibly do a lot of damage. You know, crack the blocks or crack the heads or blow a head gasket or other kinds of expensive things. So checking your serpentine belt regularly and replacing it with a high quality belt is definitely something you should do. And like I said before, I've just recently discovered the Gates Fleetrunner belt line. I'm not really sure how long these have been out, but definitely I want to go with as much of a heavy duty belt or upgrade as I can. And let me get my stool over here so I can point better at a better angle. Another thing to look out for on these 351 Windsors or 302, basically the Ford small blocks, is on the timing chain cover to engine block right here, and I've got a light shining on it, and you can see just a little bit of coolant starting to come out between the two pieces. There's a gasket, timing cover gasket that goes to the block that tends to fail on the small block Fords, and it leaks a ton of water and tends to pool right here in the cavity. And the same thing is true on the other side, but you really can't see because of all the hoses. And that's a very typical problem. And to complicate matters, the water pump bolts are also a problem. You've got, if the camera ever focuses this year, a water pump bolt there on the bottom, and another one right there, and of course two on the other side. And you have to basically take the water pump off, take these two bolts out here, and they almost always snap off somewhere inside between the water pump timing chain cover, to toward the block, and it just creates a complete mess to try to back those screws out of there. You got to get a easy out or drill it out, and just makes for a nightmare. Fortunately though, I lucked out on this truck, and that's why it took me a little bit of time to get to the coolant, because what you see here is nothing compared to what it was before. This thing was leaking a lot of coolant before, and I was very hesitant on doing the radiator flush and then putting new coolant in here, only to have it leak out everywhere. And it's really kind of too cold to do the timing chain cover job. It's not terribly difficult, but it's pretty involved. You got to pull the harmonic balancer off and take off the water pump and take off a lot of other accessories. But if you can do it yourself, you can save a lot of money. I think a lot of people get around $700 to do that. But I lucked out, because knowing that these bolts down here are such a problem, I very carefully backed out each one of those, and then ran the threads through a die from a tap and die set, and then put some anti-seize on those threads and ran them back in. And in the process of doing that, what I discovered is not the top one, but the bottom one on each side was so loose I almost didn't need a wrench to get it off. And so I ended up getting lucky, because when I put the anti-seize on there to lubricate the threads and clean the threads up, it made it a lot easier to get a good torque on these nuts or studs. And what ended up happening was I have a lot more pressure on that timing chain cover to the block now, which has almost virtually eliminated the leak. That's pretty much all it does right now, which to me is pretty acceptable. It's not, I don't see any drips of coolant running down the block or anything like that. It's definitely not leaking to the point now where I would have to go through the time and expense of pulling off the water pump and timing chain cover and getting into all that and replacing it just for such a minor leak. But I am going to keep my eye on it and keep an eye on the coolant level, just to make sure it doesn't get any worse. And if it does, it's no big deal now, because I know that these bolts down here and two on the other side are in good enough shape that I can go ahead with confidence and take off that water pump and not have to worry about spending an extra 8 hours trying to get these studs out of here, depending upon how many get stuck in the block, because they shear off. So that enabled me to go ahead and do the radiator job. So now that I have a new serpentine belt ready to go in, I'm going to attempt to film the process. Not sure how successful I'll be, because this is a camera with an incredibly small viewing angle, and I can't even really get the entire engine frame really, because it's so small. I have a pretty wide engine, but essentially the process is this. You would need a 15mm socket, and you would put that on the belt tensioner pulley, just like that, and you would just press down like this, just like you were trying to loosen it, and then you would slip the belt off, and then slowly let this return to its normal position to get it out of the way, and then work the belt off. And on most cars and trucks, you should be able to find a sticker somewhere in the engine compartment that tells you exactly how the belt is going to be routed. So just in case you don't remember what it looked like when you took it off, you can always refer to that little sticker as a fail-safe and carry on with the job. So I don't know how much of this you guys are going to be able to see. So I got my wrench right here. I'm going to go ahead and push down. And I'm going to work that belt from under the idler pulley up here that I replaced recently. That's the easiest way to do it. And I'll take it off the alternator next. That gives me enough slack to let go of the idler pulley, so I don't have to keep holding it anymore. And I can take the wrench back out to gain some clearance. And now it's just a matter of working the belt out. So we'll work it out from under the idler pulley and the air pump, or smog pump as most people like to call it. So now I've got most of the belt here in my hand. We'll go ahead and get it off of the air conditioning compressor and power steering. Now you've got a lot of this belt lift. Working away from the crankshaft pulley, and out she comes. It's actually just that quick to take one off. So now we'll go ahead with our new belt. And installation is just going to be the reverse of removal. We'll go ahead and start this around the crankshaft pulley first. Making sure we get it on all the ridges. And then we'll work it around the water pump backwards. Just like so. Next we'll go around the power steering pump. And now we're getting to the AC compressor right here. And I'm stopping along the way just to make sure that I've got everything lined up properly. And next is going to be the smog pump down here. And now I've got it over the alternator. Actually, now the next after the alternator, we want to go under the idler pulley. And let me pause for a second because I've got the routing confused. It seems like I'm running out of slack there, but let me take a second, look at my diagram like I pointed out earlier, and see how to get past it. Okay, finally figured out the problem. I had the alternator side of it routed wrong. I got the wrench put back on because now I'm at the point where I want to get the belt over the idler pulley as the last step. And we'll go ahead and depress that as far as we can go. Working under that idler pulley. And make sure that we have all the pulleys lined up, and we don't. Power steering slipped off just a little bit. There we go. Kind of a stiff belt to work with. It's pretty cold out here, about 28 degrees. And then we'll go ahead and release our tension. Took about maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I'll show you what it is that I did. Once I got to this alternator part, I actually had the belt going from the air pump to the alternator and then going under the idler pulley, which was wrong. I just naturally wanted to do that. It actually goes from the air pump to the idler pulley and then back around. So, still not too difficult of a job to do. Hopefully you guys can see how easy that is, and if you do get caught in a jam like I just did, if you forget how it's routed or doesn't seem to be going in like it should, you can always refer to the drawing and immediately figure out what the problem is. And it's also worth mentioning that it's pretty easy to get the belt around the water pump going the wrong way. And that's really bad because that's almost like driving without a water pump at all. It, moves the water in the wrong direction. So just as a double check, you always want to make sure that the belt routing is okay. It looks like it is. It's going from the crankshaft, turns around, goes upside down, and then around the water pump, around your power steering, back up to the air conditioning under this pulley, and then continues around the alternator. And you want to make sure that it's actually lined up and not halfway slipping off of the pulleys. So it looks like it is. And kind of interesting that it's green. That's pretty cool because you don't really see that unless you're working on some of the heavy duty diesels. But let's go ahead and cold start it and check for leaks at that transmission cooler line, and also see how our belt's doing. That squeak I had on the belt system now seems to be gone, so that's good. Everything seems to be running just fine and everything's lined up. I'll let the engine get nice and hot and let that belt set in a little bit more. Then I'll come under here and check that cooler line real quick just to be sure that we don't have any leaks. Always want to do that. And that's bone dry, which is good. There's the other end of it right there. It seems to be dry. So that's a good repair. You can see just how bad that belt really is. It was still working pretty good though. But definitely time to be changed. I'm going to go ahead and use that sleeve right there and put the old belt back in it and keep that in the back of the truck as a spare. But I think so far I'm pretty happy with how easy this was. So slowly but surely making some upgrades on this truck. I've got the new double core radiator and the high capacity battery and the heavy duty Serpentine belt. And here's the old transmission cooler hose. Definitely time to be replaced. Not leaking or anything, and still kind of flexible, but nonetheless, good idea to get rid of it. But hopefully you guys have seen how easy this Serpentine belt job is to do, and you can go ahead and tackle something like that yourself instead of having to go to the car dealer.